What I'm going to do in this session is really really see whether we've got any remaining questions for a few minutes, and then really ask Lisa to wrap up for the day. I thought I'd just try and say what is it that I haven't heard today, and see whether people want to respond from the floor to some of these issues. I really have 4 questions for people. First, I think the discussion on fish was fantastic. And only right at the end did somebody drag the algae in. And I wondered what happened to the aquatic plants as a very serious, massive potential source of long-term food. I was struck by the work that colleagues have been doing underway in Saudi Arabia and other parts of the world, investing very seriously in trying to understand the aquatic plant environment, not just as a source of focused nutrients, but as a very serious long-term source of food. So keen to hear anybody who's thinking about the aquatic plant world, and is it not on the agenda because it doesn't fit neatly into any particular body's category? So it's, it's where fish live, I thought, but it's not really part of fisheries per se, and agriculture tends to be terrestrial rather than marine or aquatic. So that's one, just for you to think about, and you don't have to answer any of these questions if nobody wants to. The second is a deeper question around food and the way we classify food, because a lot of the debate requires us having a classification of food when we're looking at the environmental consequences, which makes some assumptions about what we exclude or don't call as food, even though we eat it or drink it. So some examples there would be coffee, tea, and cocoa. In some debates are classified as food, and the large investments from the public sector go into supporting coffee, tea, and cocoa production as if they are equivalent to nutrient-rich foods, and often using, in this country, federal dollars for USAID programs on cocoa farmers in parts of the world and so on. And I just wondered if there's any discussion out there about being a little bit more specific about what constitutes food in the public policy forum. The one crop I never heard spoke about, which I think is the example of the nexus of bads, health and environmental bads, is palm oil. And it obviously has enormously destructive effects on the environment, and the sustainable palm people will lead us to believe that they've solved the problem, but in fact they haven't. And we know that the very same companies and groups supporting sustainable palm in parts of Asia are rapidly expanding and destroying the rainforests of West Africa. What we also don't talk about was the work I did with my colleagues on a previous Institute of Medicine committee looking at the long-term impact of cardiovascular disease worldwide, which puts palm certainly as something to be reduced and ideally removed from the diets of humans. Otherwise, we will continue to see what is starting to be a spiraling of cardiovascular risk across Asia. And again, there'll be many who will say that the evidence isn't strong enough and so on. Well, I think whether it's the IOM or many other statements of WHO over the years have made it very clear that it's not desirable, and there are a range of healthier oils, which leads us into the debate around the environmental consequences of those healthy oils as well. So that's the second one. The third is almost thinking the unthinkable, that if we're going to run out of land and water and energy for protein, have people here been thinking about the rapid expansion we're seeing by some in laboratory-generated amino acid supplies as a long-term source of particularly amino acids and proteins? And then finally, for the economists, I really think one of the toughest things we need to address is how do we find the right economic arguments and incentives to move from a quantity-based focused diet to a quality-based diet. And that seems to underpin our ability to actually tackle obesity long term. And obviously requires thinking both through the financing alongside the messaging and the labeling together. And the example, I think, of interesting success is in the detergent business. Anybody who read a recent Wall Street Journal article would have found it interesting that Tide manufactures these tiny little detergents that you throw into your washing machine, has now cornered a huge proportion of the detergent market with a product that uses less stuff, in that case less detergent, less environmental damage, costs slightly more, and the article was really about the overall impact on the business, not just theirs, but the entire detergent business, meaning that there was going to be less demand for other people's stuff as they succeeded. They were, of course, tremendously profitable and doing well, but it is an example of actually selling less stuff, being profitable, but having a disruptive technology that's challenging the notion that you can't do good for the environment and sell less all at the same time. What's the equivalent thought that we need to have for obesity? So with those 4 ideas, I'll just throw them out for any quick discussion or ideas, comments, to see if there is any. Over to you. Yes.
That last question was for an economist, perhaps, but I guess if Parkwild can talk about nutrition, I can talk about economy. So I think the key is protein. So we know that protein regulates appetite, and it's also the most expensive thing in the store, and although Michael Pollan seems to believe that we eat more food because it's cheap, it really doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of an economic argument. What's probably more likely is that because we eat cheap food, which has a low protein density, we eat a lot more of it because humans are driven to keep eating until they acquire the protein that they need. So if we're going to talk about quality rather than quantity, we need to quit talking about calories in and calories out and start talking about what our essential nutrition needs are. And those begin with protein requirements, and not just protein sort of globally, because we talk about plant protein, but essential amino acid requirements. The highest quality source of those are animal foods. They're also the most expensive. They're also the most impactful in terms of the environment. So it's sort of an ugly little trifecta there, but that's where we need to talk about these things. We need to get protein to people early, often, and in good quality, but in such a way that the rest, they're not spending the rest of their calories and days trying to accumulate protein.
Great, thank you. Do you have any thoughts about why, would you feel uncomfortable with that, the source of those amino acids being a laboratory? And I ask that not trivially. There are companies doing that not very far from here, looking very seriously at changing the equation. I mean, that is pretty game-changing. If you're able to produce the necessary essential amino acids in the laboratory at lower costs in terms of the environment, why would we not want to do that? Anyway.
Yes, on the first question.
Yeah.
Stores across America where these products are consumed by indigenous peoples and more adventurous American residents of other, the majority ethnic background that's diets seem to be very monotonous. And so there's a real problem because I've actually tried to get rednecks in South Georgia and North Florida to eat seaweed, and unless you fry it or do something else, make it look like a French and taste like a French fry, it's a real hard sell. But there was a article in Marine Drugs last year that's an excellent review of plant-based aquatic foods. It also reviews fish and fish oils, but the majority of it is on plant-based foods. I'll be happy to send anyone a PDF of that if they wish. All right. And the second question was what?
Well, you could take any of them. The question of coffee, tea, and cocoa.
Functional beverages, yes.
Yeah,
That's an incredible opportunity. And if you look at traditional cultures around the world, there are myriads of traditional functional beverages. A lot of them are fermented. A lot of them are just combinations of a lot of different plants that have a tremendous potential to incorporate into a healthy diet in the United States.
Great.
So that's basic.
Yeah, I went to go and visit these halophyte production units, as I say, on the Red Sea, and was quite impressed. I think what's interesting is that it started in Whole Foods, but it's now spreading these Korean-originated, very thin seaweed things with sesame and God knows what added to them, which are spectacularly delicious and unbelievably low calorie content. I think that's just the start.
Well, first, I have to speak in favor of seaweed. It's delicious. Your friends don't know what they're missing. But as to sort of the palm oil issue, I mean, palm as a crop is one of the greatest releasers of greenhouse gas because of the land that has to be cleared to grow palm. And so it's really a double bad, which I don't think you were emphasizing. And I didn't realize that palm oil was bad for health. So since you're my nutritionist of choice, I'll believe you on that point. I'm not being sarcastic. I really don't know. But I do think that if you look at, if you look at palm oil's life cycle production, there's an incredible number of kilocalories produced per hectare. So if you look at the production greenhouse gas and other environmental impacts, it's pretty low. If you look at the land clearing impacts that goes with palm oil production in Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on, the greenhouse gas release is immensely high. It's why on the greenhouse gas life cycle for biofuels, palm oil takes 423 years before you're even with gasoline. And the same thing is true on the food side, same release.
Right. Please.
Seafood in the U.S., 20 million pounds are harvested, and under 500 of kelp with herring eggs, just for the facts. So the U.S. harvests 20 million pounds. I suspect most of that's Caribbean, where they're using it as a gelling product. But I was in Costco last week, and they were actually selling big barrels, big containers of dried seafood, dry seaweed at bargain prices.
Great. I would like to state that I do not represent the kelp industry or their affiliates. But I think it is a big neglected area for us to think about, that obviously there's a bigger surface area to tap that we haven't really tapped. Yes, please.
Back to your question about coffee, tea, and cocoa. Obviously, under the FDA regs, all of those are considered food, because food by the FDA is anything that's basically consumed by humans. I would like to ask maybe Marty Heller or somebody else about LCAs. I've seen them done on coffee for various reasons. I think that we have information, people are paying attention to them. So it'd be interesting to know whether all three of them kind of go under the radar screen in terms of food groups because of their all being imported, and because coffee and tea, not cocoa, are so low in calories that we don't think about them that much. Any thoughts?
Okay, since there are no more thoughts, let me then also move to close by asking my colleague Lisa Ekman from the Chicago Council on Global Affairs to give her thoughts and summary of the day. I've been thrilled to work with Lisa and the Chicago Council's Global Agricultural Development Group, who've actually tackled a number of the issues here, starting from the agricultural perspective, and I think it's wonderful to now see being approached from the nutrition and then looking at the relationship to agriculture. So Lisa, for you to close.